It's coaching vacancies open. There's a whole bunch of candidates. We're going to talk about who the best candidates are and who the best job is. We'll do that here and more on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yo, it is your team every day here on Locked On NFL. We thank you for making us your first listen and reminding you that wherever you hear or listen or watch your podcast, make sure you check into that location each and every day. You can start the season, the preseason or the postseason with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets if you win or lose your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Shout out to the Everydayers for joining us. And if this is your first time, I hope you enjoy today's show, which I have the host of the Washington Commanders and the squad shows here on the Locked On Podcast Network, my man David Harrison. He's going to help walk us through this all. All right, the Washington effect, playoff preview. We're going to talk about how Washington was able to do what some owners around the league don't believe you can do. And what that is fix it all in one off season and start heading in the right direction. And then we'll playoff preview their game against the Bucs. Y'all might not know David was also the co-host of Locked On Bucs for a number of years. So he has a little bit of insight on both of these teams and can help us navigate through what we expect to see. The best coaching vacancy, that's a up for debate, and that's one also going to come up. There are more candidates than vacancies. However, there are 2 or 3 candidates that will have their pick of those vacancies. Which one do you think they should take? And also up top, who are those coaches that I'm talking about? Well, the Bears have about 25 of them, but that's okay. We're just going to focus on a certain group here on Locked On NFL today. David, my man, it is cold here in Florida, so I know it is cold up in the DMV area where you are. Hope you're keeping warm a little bit, Doc.
Oh yeah, I got my layers ready. I got it's bad down here. So I plan on staying in my car and in buildings as much as possible. But for the times I have to be outside, I am prepared.
That's right. So might be cold where we are, but that seat that's called the GM and the head coaching, that is hot. And a lot of guys have been let go around the National Football League. There's a lot of people using a lot of coach speak type words and innuendo and stuff that is really, really, really driving me crazy, man. And that's some of the things I want to get to today. One, we'll start in Jacksonville. And I'm going to let you give your spill on some of the things. First, I got to set it up by telling you that Shad Khan feels that if you fire the coach and the GM, that you have to fire 85 other people in the building also. And that's one of the rationales he used. He also said, well, who are you going to get to find better? That him and Trent Baalke are going to go looking for a coach. And if that coach comes in and says that he doesn't necessarily want to work with Baalke and he can present a plan that is better, then he'll listen to it. I think all of that is Bush League. I think it's really a bunch of crap about people not wanting to make decisions. Just knowing what I just told you, how does that sound? Does that, with your experience with Washington, who had the worst run organization, not only in football, but in sports, and they did it and flipped it in one season. So tell me, what is your thought on that?
It basically sounds to me like an owner who is focusing on problems and not focusing on solutions. Come on, you can give yourself all the reasons in the world to not do something, especially when it seems hard or it feels hard. But the mark of a true leader is doing the hard stuff when the hard stuff needs to be done. Ooh. And you have to have these uncomfortable conversations with people, and you have to have these uncomfortable moments. But you can't just sit here and say we're going to just continue to try to do the majority of what we've been doing, but we're going to change a little bit here, a little bit there. Like, bro, your recipe is not one ingredient away from being 5-star.
Come on,
your recipe is 2-star at best, and one of the main parts of that recipe you're keeping around for some reason, man. I felt bad for you, bro. As soon as I saw this news come out, I just thought about Wig. I was like, man.
And you know what Wig did
for another year?
Yeah, and Wig thought about 950,000 people that are either fans or season ticket holders that travel around like the Bowl City Brigade does. Wig thought about them, and Wig thought about people that fit in all 3 of those categories. Peacock and Williamson. Peacock's out obviously right now tending to family, but Ross Jackson has sat in for him for a minute, and he asked Brian Matt Williamson, who is the former NFL scout and who is my Friday host here on Locked On NFL, what he thinks about the Jaguars, their job, and a certain candidate. Check this out.
Just looking across the NFL, to no one's surprise, the three big names that we're seeing everywhere: Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, Mike Vrabel. Let's start off with Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions. We spoke a little bit about him yesterday and how good that fit feels for him over in Jacksonville. And, well, he's early on Jacksonville's list.
Yeah, I like the fit quite a bit. I mean, just because I think Lawrence has so much untapped potential. And frankly, if you look at the final stats or EPA or DVOA of the Jacksonville offense this year, half of the year was with Mac Jones. It wasn't that terrible. I mean, it really wasn't. And if you could put his, panache on it and maybe do a little bit on defense, I don't think they're that far off. I mean, that owner has shown that he will spend.
Yeah, all of that's true, and I appreciate Matt saying that. Ben Johnson seems like number one on everybody's list. I know the Jaguar fan base feels that way. I know you have experienced the Ben Johnson effect last year with Washington, and he obviously chose not to accept that job. To me, he's the top candidate, and I like Liam Cohen, who we're going to talk about later on. For the Bucks, and I also like Aaron Glenn. And I don't care whether they hire a play caller or not. I need them to first hire a leader of men and let him hire a play caller, even if he's a defensive coach, kind of like Dan Campbell did.
Yeah, listen, that's the question. You just hit it right on the head. We all know Ben Johnson scheme up an offense. We know that Ben Johnson can call plays. We know that Ben Johnson knows the X's and O's. But I always go back to what Bruce Arians said: 2-time coach of the year, resurrected the Arizona Cardinals, resurrected the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, kept the Colts going while his head coach was battling cancer. I mean, the resume speaks for itself. And what Bruce Arians always said is, it's not about the X's and O's. It's about the Jimmies and Joes. And how does Ben Johnson impact the Jimmies and Joes? Because that's going to ultimately decide how successful he is as a head coach. We get wrapped up, and I say we as in media, I say we as in fans, and I say we sometimes as an NFL franchise, we get wrapped up about, man, this guy's offense scored 47 points a game. Man, this guy's defense had 5 interceptions a game. That's amazing. But if your head coach can't rally the troops when the three phases don't work together, when the defense gives up 30 points and the offense scores 30 or 29 points and you lose, or when the offense scores 14 points and the defense gives up 15 points and you lose, if you can't rally the troops, what you're going to end up with is infighting. You're going to end up with coaches blaming each other, pointing the finger at each other. And I just always go back to when you hear Detroit Lions players talk about their team, Dan Campbell always comes up. Dan Campbell always comes up. Aaron Glenn comes up when you hear defensive players talk. I don't hear enough offensive players talk about Ben Johnson, and it's not evidence that he's not a good leader, and I don't want to pitch it as that. But Ben Johnson's ability to scheme up a scheme with Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jared Goff is not the main criteria for whether or not he should be a head coach. How he is as a leader of men, like you just said, what staff he's going to bring is a big part of this, and how he sees coming into it. Right now, you have to understand as an owner, GM, making this hire, whatever it is, that once the guy gets on ground and gets his hands on the roster, things can change. But how much of a grip do you have on this roster today? Because if I'm a head coach candidate and I sit down and Tony Wiggins is the GM and says, okay, David Harris, you want to be the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars, what's your plan for Trevor Lawrence? Say, I think Trevor Lawrence is a really good young man, good quarterback, he's got a good skill set. I think we can win with him. What did I just tell you? I didn't tell you a darn thing. I didn't say anything to you. And what does that tell you if you're listening to me? It means I don't know. And if I don't even have a plan, and I'm not saying that Ben Johnson doesn't, let me understand. Let's get this clear. But there's a lot more to this job than can he call a scheme? Okay? Yep. Like there's a lot more. Like that's calling the scheme just gets you in the door. You got to have the rest of it. And I'll be honest with you, Wig, we've heard a lot of reasons why Ben Johnson pulled himself out of the Washington Commanders job, whether it go from what quarterback he wanted versus the quarterback Adam Peters wanted, whether it goes to he just loved the Detroit Lions and wanted to continue that ride. But I look at the guy they hired because, remember, Ben Johnson was like everybody's number one pick, but then it was Mike McDonald, Bobby Slowick, like even Aaron Glenn was in there. Like there was a lot of names before Dan Quinn. But who ended up getting hired? Dan Quinn. And what was Dan Quinn? What did Dan Quinn bring with him? Dan Quinn brought with him an all-star staff. I mean, you're talking Anthony Lynn, former head coach, Brian Johnson, former offensive coordinator, Cliff Kingsbury, former head coach, Joe Witt Jr., his defensive coordinator, a Super Bowl winning secondary coach from his days with the Green Bay Packers. And you just go down the list. Ken Norton Jr., Jason Simmons. I mean, look at Darryl Tapp. Look at the staff that he brought with him. And then look at here's who we're going to be as Washington Commanders. I'm telling you, bro, from introductory press conference to wild card round of the playoffs, Dan Quinn's message has been the same on who a Washington Commander is, what the Washington Commanders are going to be. And not only that, but every move he's made, bro, he has released first-round draft picks. He has traded first-round draft picks. This has not been a system of saying, we're going to come in here timid. We're going to come here and figure it out. We're going to come here and see what we want to see. No, this is who we are. This is who we are from a staff and who we're going to be from a roster, and we're going to shape that roster that way, hell or high water. I don't know that Ben Johnson would have got this job, to be quite honest with you. After seeing what Dan Quinn brought to this organization, I don't know that Ben Johnson would have got this job. And imagine, this works, Wig. Imagine the Washington Commanders interview Ben Johnson, fly to Detroit to interview Ben Johnson, and they give the job to Dan Quinn. Mm-hmm. What is Ben Johnson's stock? These guys have agents. If his agent's getting wind that, hey, Dan Quinn blew the socks off these dudes, and Ben Johnson can't blow the socks off because this isn't against Ben Johnson. Ben hasn't been in the league like Dan Quinn has been in the league. He doesn't have the connections that Dan has. And guess what? Pete Carroll, someone who Dan is tied to, retired. That opens up a lot of coaches that are tied to Pete Carroll that no longer have Pete to tie themselves to. All of these things. Ben Johnson doesn't have those, man. Ben Johnson's the Dan Campbell tree. How big is the Dan Campbell tree? It's a sapling. In relativity to the rest of the coaching trees, it's a sapling. So I'm not saying Ben Johnson can't be a good head coach. I'm just saying, and I said this last year because I knew he was the sexiest name. I like the name as well, but I had these reservations. I said, look, we're falling too in love with the offense in Detroit. That's not all that Ben Johnson has to bring. It's just like drafting who wins the national championship this year? That quarterback should be the number 1 overall pick. No, because that just gets your foot in the door of the conversation. You got to look at the rest of it.
So you're right. Here's the leader of men part of it.
I know I took that offline, bro. I'm sorry.
No. Listen, Dan Quinn played tight end. Do you think TJ Hawkinson is a good football player? I do.
Mm-hmm.
Dan Quinn, they had TJ Hawkinson. Dan Quinn and Brad Holmes traded him in the division. I know, I don't care. Yeah, go get Sam Laporta. And they asked Sam Laporta to block all game, one game, and then the next game they'll throw it to him 5 times. You know who makes that? A leader. Jahmyr Gibbs, one of the 3 best running backs in the NFL. Would you agree?
Yep.
Maybe 4. Highly paid. Doesn't start. David Montgomery does. You know who can make that happen without them guys pouting and snatching each other's chains off? A leader of men.
Yep.
Amon-Ra St. Brown in the game against the 49ers. My buddy had him in the fantasy championship. He got one target in the first half. Came out in the second half, got about 8 of them. And they blew him away. You know who doesn't pout? Amon-Ra St. Brown. Why?
Yep.
Leader of men. That's why. We're going to discuss the best coaching vacancy here as we move forward with Locked On NFL. A lot more to unpack and uncover with my man David Harrison of Locked On Commanders and Locked On NFL. We'll do it in just a second here on Locked On NFL. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by FanDuel. That is right, man. FanDuel is our sponsor for today here on Locked On NFL. I know the football season is almost over, but guess what? From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Visit the website and share betting lines around your team and league with your friends so you guys can come up with the right picks on FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And today's show is brought to you and sponsored by Prize Picks, man. We're going to win money all day here. It's playoff time, and you're like me. If you're like me, you want to make the most of these final weeks of football action. That's where Prize Picks comes in. If you love football and want a chance to win real money while watching the games, Prize Picks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. I've been playing this for a while now, and I'm pretty sure that when this playoff game starts, that my man Saquon Barkley is going to get a whole bunch of carries, and Philly is going to depend on him. So you need to make sure you look at that and go more with Saquon. Here's a special offer for Locked On NFL listeners. Download the app today and use the code Locked On NFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks. You need to make sure you run your game. All right, moving along here on Locked On NFL, where's your team every day? Got my man David Harrison talking about coaches, available coaches, and coaching vacancies. First, before we hit the vacancies, I like Dan Campbell. I really like Liam Cohen also with his ability, and this goes back to him making Will Levis look like he was competent at Kentucky. It's all of that stuff. He's the head coach of the offense basically in Tampa, and that, I look at that and think that's big. I really, really like Aaron Glenn a lot too. And Aaron Glenn, even though he's a defensive coach, everybody's so worried about Trevor Lawrence. Guess what Aaron Glenn can do? Aaron Glenn can go hire somebody just like Dan Quinn did to run the offense. Yeah. That's what he can do. He can do what Dan Campbell did, go hire the next Ben Johnson. That's what he can do. And just in case you're worried about if that guy gets pulled away, you can make sure he hires his own quarterbacks coach, his receivers coach, and a quality assurance guy to make sure that thing keeps going, just like it did with the Rams, where Kevin O'Connell came from, just like it has done with the 49ers, where all of those guys have come from. Yep. It's funny how the dude that is the head coach, who's a play caller, still manages to find ways to produce other guys who end up being play callers for everybody else. So I don't know why he can't produce it to be a play caller for this organization if he gets a job. It's crazy to me to think that the only people that can do that are offensive coordinators. So
focus on the solution, not the problem.
There you go. That's what it is, man. And that's the best way we can put it. The coaching vacancies. I think structurally, with the fact that Shad Khan is not a meddlesome owner, structurally with the fact that they're in a pretty good place with salary cap. They do have Trevor Lawrence, who does need a little bit more push. They have some nice pieces in place. I like the job here. I don't like the job in Jacksonville if about it still has Trent Baalke in place. So that knocks it down a notch or two for me. I would think for my money, I would take the Bears job over any job in the National Football League if I was one of these guys.
Yeah, for the record, Brian Flores is my favorite head coaching candidate this coaching carousel season, and just his leadership is well known. 2, his integrity. I mean, you want to talk about bringing legitimacy to your team. This man his integrity is not going to be questioned. This man is going to go out there to win every single game, no matter what the context is. And he's connected directly to the Bill Belichick tree, who is no longer in NFL head coaching. Bill Belichick, that tree is ripe for the picking. Go get you some Bill Belichick staffers that Brian Flores trusts. Anyway, moving on to the jobs. Wig, I will tell you one reason why the Chicago Bears job is not number 1 on my list. Brian Poles.
You don't like Ryan? I like Ryan Poles.
I said Brian Poles. I would think Brian Flores. Ryan Poles. I do not like Ryan Poles. The reason I don't like Ryan Poles is because this is a man who already, listen, I have confidence that Caleb Williams can be a good quarterback in this National Football League. I have faith that the Chicago Bears could possibly win with Caleb Williams as the quarterback. What I don't like and what I never like is when a leader hones in on one solution to a problem. We need a quarterback. And he says, Caleb Williams is the guy. Doesn't even look at the other opportunities, doesn't even look at the other potential. And I don't even want to get into the conversation. Would Jaden Daniels have been better? I'm not even talking about that. But the bottom line problem is this man saw a twinkle in his eye and said, that's where I'm going from January. You know what I mean? And he's got a history of not working well with his head coach. So unless you're a head coach, if you come in, honestly, if I'm a head coach candidate, Ryan Poles is going to ask me questions, but I'm going to say to Ryan Poles, what is your vision for this roster? What does Chicago Bears roster look like from a characteristic standpoint? And if every word that comes out of Ryan Poles' mouth does not match my football theology, I'm not taking that job because we're not going to succeed. I go back to Jason Light and before Bruce Arians, right? We talked about this Buccaneers thing before. Jason Light was drafting players. I look at Vita Vea. Bro, Vita Vea was not on the trajectory that he has gotten onto before Bruce Arians and Todd Bowles arrived, because when Todd Bowles arrived, he used Vita Vea in a way that he wasn't being used in under Mike Smith, the defensive coordinator, before he arrived. Mike Smith had a vision for how to use his defense. That was one way. Jason Light was drafting players that fit a different way. Right. Now, fortunately for that franchise, Jason Light eventually brought the right guy in. So that's where I come to. If you're not lockstep with Ryan Poles, you're not going to succeed, because this dude is not going to give you the players that fit your mentality. He's going to give you the players that fit his mentality and expect you to operate it. So unless you get the coach that's in lockstep with him, it's just not going to work. So again, if you're a head coaching candidate and you go in there, Ryan Poles says, this is what I want the Chicago Bears to be. And you're like, man, I love every second you just, every word you just said, we're lockstep. Let's go do this. Fine. I'm 100% on board. But if there's even one valuable characteristic that is different between you and your GM who's not giving you any roster control, I don't take that job. It's also the reason why I hesitate when I say the real job that I think is the best job, Wig. That's Las Vegas Raiders. The Las Vegas Raiders job is the best job in the league to me. And I'll tell you why. You look at the Washington Commanders this year, you look at the Houston Texans last year. What do they have in common? They brought in coaches who had connections to coaches who brought in powerful coaching staffs. They also reshaped their rosters to fit them. Listen, the Houston Texans, the year before DeMeco Ryans, the first year of DeMeco Ryans last year, new quarterback was new, leading rusher was new, leading receiver was new. Their leading receiver last year was their third leading receiver the year before. That's how much they rose Nico Collins up the board. Their two leading tacklers from 2022, not even on the roster in 2023.
Wow.
That is a franchise overhaul. How did they do that? They had draft capital. They had money. They had a GM and head coach that were willing to make the moves necessary to make this team better. Now, I know it didn't work out as well this year. Injuries had a lot to do with that, all kinds of other stuff, all the yeah buts in the world. But you look at that franchise, look at the Washington Commanders. What they do, they brought in draft capital, money, a head coach and GM that were on the same page, and a 63% active roster turnover from the year before to the first year under this head coach. You want to find out how you flip a franchise in one offseason? It's not by the way the Jacksonville Jaguars doing it, saying we think we're close. Bro, if you're hiring a new head coach, you are not close. It's by admitting that you don't have a good team and using your assets to go make a good team. The Las Vegas Raiders, right now, one of the top teams in 2025 cap room, have 4 picks in the top 100. One of those picks is top 6 overall. I don't like this quarterback class. So what I would do is I'd bring in a head coach and I would bring in a GM. I know Tom Telesco is supposed to be leading that coaching search, but Tom Brady is going to have a hand in that search. Tom Brady wants to win. And if I'm Cliff Kingsbury,
I hear you
I'm
now.
coming into that interview because remember, the Raiders offered him a job last year. Now he bowed out. Now I don't know if that left any boo-boos. Okay. But if it didn't, and the Raiders interview Cliff Kingsbury, I'm telling him I want to bring Lance Newmark, he was an executive in Detroit, assistant GM here in Washington. We did his 1-year turnaround. I want to come into Vegas. You have no quarterback I'm married to. You got all the cap, all the draft capital. Here's the staff I'm going to bring with me. Me and Lance Newmark are lockstep because we saw the way to do it in Washington. We're not going to spend the number 6 overall pick on a quarterback. We're going to spend it on either Ted McMillan out of Arizona, the wide receiver, or Will Johnson, the cornerback out of Michigan. Get a key person there in the passing game. And then we're going to trade up to number 32, and we're going to take Jalen Milroe out of Alabama. We might go get a veteran like Justin Fields or something to hold the spot while Jalen completely grows into his NFL legs. But then we're going to use the rest of our draft capital, and we're going to use the rest of our money to bring in a whole lot of veteran leaders, a whole lot of people that can help us. Zach Ertz might come in as a tight end coach if he retires. All these great things, and we're going to get the Raiders back on track. And when Tom Brady hears that plan, I'm sorry, Tom Telesco, you're about to get fired.
And guess what? They have something that Brady is very, very familiar with that allows for a young quarterback to have a soft landing. Brock Bowers. Everybody loves a tight end that can be your buddy and sit in the flat or give you an easy target across the middle. And Tom Brady has always had great tight ends, and I'm sure that that plan you have will really work in Las Vegas. You've seen it firsthand. We're going to talk about the Commanders. We ain't even talking about football stuff. We're going to talk about all of the things that they've done in 1 year to just this almost seems like they've erased 20 years of history and gone back to the Joe Gibbs era overnight. And we know it didn't happen like that. And there was a lot of hard conversations that had to be had. Yeah. But I want you to use your firsthand experience to explain to our listeners and our watchers, our viewers, exactly how that happened. We'll do that in the third and final segment here on Locked On NFL. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help anybody find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? Well, it definitely happened to me, and a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for. It was taking money out of my account, and I was wondering what was going on. For me, one of the best features at Rocket Money is a subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and I've already saved a ton. Because Rocket Money is really like a personal financial app that helps you cancel unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. I'm telling you, there's no more stressing and guessing about budgeting every month, because Rocket Money has really helped me with that. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked-on today. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on. One more time, it is rocketmoney/locked-on. Moving along, getting along with it here on Locked On NFL with my man David Harrison. We have talked about the best coaches available, the ones we like, the ones we don't like, best coaching vacancies available. Both of us have given our preference when it comes to that. Now we're going to talk about the Washington effect before we preview their game against the Tampa Bay Bucks, which I think is really, really sticky and tricky. One of the things that I don't like about these conversations and decisions is when someone goes, yeah, I really like Kellen Moore. I heard it on the radio yesterday with one of my dear friends. He said, I like Kellen Moore. One, he's played in it. He'd be good for Trevor because he's played in the NFL. He was a quarterback. He can relate to the position, and that really helps Trevor. So we just forget that Doug Peterson also been playing in the NFL. The dude that just fired has that same description in his bio, right? So it's like, don't say that. That means nothing to me right now, because we've done that already, right? I mean, it can't be that, and that alone can't be the thing that you plant a flag on, bro, because the coach you're firing won a Super Bowl and is an Andy Reid disciple and played quarterback. I mean, if that's the case, then why don't you just keep him, right?
And Jalen Hurts hasn't gotten any better this year under Kellen Moore. And I would ask you, how many coaches follow Kellen Moore from Dallas to Los Angeles and then from Los Angeles to Philly?
Yeah, there you go. So see, that's the point. And now we can make that argument about Cliff Kingsbury, but I do believe that Kingsbury, he was circumvented by Bidwill. That whole deal out there in Arizona, this was just a bad situation for him to be in. I think he's learned. I think he's had to take a little bit of a step back. And that's why I think the next step will be big. But I want you to explain to us some of the things that Washington has done. When they took over, they didn't say, well, we can't do this and we can't do that and we can't do this. And we ain't trying. Like Shad Khan said that he wanted to find somebody that could come in and that is comfortable with what we're doing. And I want him to find somebody who is totally uncomfortable with being one of the worst run franchises in the league. Right. I want y'all to be uncomfortable when that person comes into this building, because that's the only way things are going to shake.
Yeah, you can't have somebody come in that building and say, we want you to be comfortable with what we're doing, because what you're doing is being one of the worst teams in the worst division in football. Nobody should be comfortable doing that. You should not be comfortable doing that if you're Shad Khan. So that's crazy in the first place. And it actually leads me to my first point. The first thing the Washington Commanders did to turn this thing over in year one is not be afraid to win. This goes back to Ryan Poles, Chicago Bears. They interviewed Cliff Kingsbury. Lauren Cox of Locked On Bears says they were never going to offer Cliff Kingsbury the offensive coordinator job. That 100% was always about getting as much intel on Caleb Williams as they possibly could, because like I said, they were locked in on Caleb from January. The official story, or quote unquote official story, coming out of Chicago is they were worried, that if they brought Cliff Kingsbury in with Caleb Williams, they would have so much success that they would lose Cliff Kingsbury, and they'd have to figure out how to continue this success in Chicago that they had, because that would be terrible to have all this success and then lose the offensive coordinator. You're scared of winning. Literally, if that is the official story, making decisions based off being scared of winning.
A good thing that ain't even happened yet.
That is an amazing problem to have. Now, if you're the Chicago Bears, you got to find a whole new coaching staff. Why? Because you lost, and you lost a lot. You know what I mean? So that's number one. Don't be afraid of winning. So if the defensive head coach is the best man for the job, brings the best staff, that's why I go back to Brian Flores. I know I said Cliff Kingsbury, Las Vegas Raiders, but remember I said my favorite coaching candidate this offseason, Brian Flores. If that is your top coaching candidate, go hire the man and go do what I said. Go draft Jalen Milroe with the 32nd pick. Trade up with whoever wins the Super Bowl who doesn't need a quarterback, and go get that fifth-year option and get your quarterback to groom. And you know what? Build yourself a staff. Now, I can't talk about Bobby Slowick and who's behind him with the Houston Texans. If the Houston Texans lose Bobby Slowick, I don't know what's going to happen to their offense. But I can tell you what's happening here in Washington. If the Washington Bears lose Cliff Kingsbury, look, he is the architect of the offense. Make no mistake about it. However, they also have Anthony Lynn, who's a former NFL head coach, run game coordinator for this offense. They also have Brian Johnson, who is the pass game coordinator, assistant head coach for this offense. I believe Brian Johnson would step up into that offensive coordinator role. And as the pass game coordinator, guess what he's been doing all year long? Working with Jaden Daniels in this Cliff Kingsbury offense, learning what Jaden likes to do best, learning what he doesn't do best, learning the weapons, learning. So you're not going to reinvent the wheel here. My prediction is you're going to promote from within. Then you bring in a new pass game coordinator. Now, well, what if Brian Johnson goes to, say, Vegas with Cliff Kingsbury? Okay, Anthony Lynn, congratulations. You've been in the room too. Now you're going to be our offense coordinator. We're going to go draft. We're going to go sign a new run game coordinator, new pass game coordinator. And what you do is you prepare solutions to the problem. And the problem here is we're winning so dang much, so we keep losing our offensive coordinators. So keep having future offensive coordinators in the wings, and not just one, two, because that guy who gets that coach job might take one of your guys to go be his offensive coordinator. Now you need another guy. That's what Dan Quinn has done. Now, again, that's just my speculation. I'm not telling you that's what Dan Quinn has said or is going to do, but the way that you just read the tea leaves, defensive head coach, Cliff Kingsbury leaves, what's the solution? You got two coordinators behind him who both have a good amount of experience, who now both could potentially move up and have been working with Jaden Daniels. So yes, it's going to look a little bit different. It's not going to be exactly Cliff Kingsbury, but those differences are going to be born from what Jaden and this offense have already done, not a new guy coming in and saying, okay, I don't know what you did before, but here's what we're going to do now. Like Liam Cohen did in Tampa. Now it worked in Tampa, but we know that 9 times out of 10, it usually doesn't work very well when you do that. So again, Chicago Bears, what you should have done is you should have hired Cliff Kingsbury, and you should have had Cliff Kingsbury bring in somebody to mentor behind him. And if you lose Cliff Kingsbury to head coaching position, congratulations, because that means you just made the playoffs. That means Caleb Williams probably offensive rookie of the year. That means you got all kinds of fanfare. You got all kinds of money. You got all kinds of love in the national media. That's not a problem, bro. But the Chicago Bears are making decisions based off of the problem of winning too much. That is the first step, to me, in a very long way of saying it, to turn your franchise around.
No doubt about it. That's why this was like a softball show to me. You're like Mickey Mantle, dude, and I threw you a fastball like 50 miles per hour, right? Because I knew what you were going to do. You knocked it out of the park, as you do always here on a Wednesday. David Harrison will be back next Wednesday. We'll be back every single day. Early in the morning, Tyler Rowland will do it for you here on Locked On NFL, where he gives you a double shot of espresso early in the morning to wake your butt right on up, and then you can slide by the barbershop, get a little haircut, a little tape up, and maybe learn about somebody's business that you ain't supposed to learn about. All right, we'll keep doing it here on Locked On NFL every single time, and you guys need to make sure you take care of each other. We'll do the same. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.